Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention?
Great Scott! There's no crying in baseball!
You better hold on tight, Spider Monkey.
This is where the fun begins.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That's right, we're ranking Den of Thieves 2, Pantera. Den of Thieves 2, Pantera is a 2025 American heist film that serves as a sequel to the 2018 film Den of Thieves. Sheriff Big Nick O'Brien pursues master thief Donnie Wilson across Europe as they become entangled with the notorious Panther Mafia in a high-stakes diamond heist. Now, this movie, I feel like, is kind of disappointing for people, but let's just get into it with the 10 essential aspects of a movie. First is plot. Does the movie follow a comprehensive story arc and is plausible within the world that has been created? Now, something I always bring up when we're talking about sequels is whether this movie warranted being made. Did you actually need to make this movie, or were you just trying to get money? And when it comes to the plot of this movie, it was somewhat warranted. Where they went with the story was interesting, and I thought it made sense with the progression. However, it just was boring. This movie is much more of a character dive than the first movie. It's less of a heist movie and more of a character development movie. And personally, I thought it was really boring. I did not think that was a good choice. So I do think that it was warranted, that the story could have been interesting, but it just didn't really work out because the characters were not that good. And also, I feel like Donnie Wilson's character in this movie kind of takes on a different role because of the ending of the first movie, and it does not fit. I just don't think the actor with the dialogue, with the acting and everything, it did not fit. I thought his character wasn't written that well. I feel like he's supposed to be much smarter than his actions are in the movie. He never really has moments where you're like, oh, I see why this guy is that good. He is that guy. That just does not happen in this movie. Most of the time I'm confused and I'm like, this guy, like, why is everyone calling this man a genius? He's not that smart. I just thought their direction with the characters were not that good. It could have been done way better. Second is attraction. Does the movie have an interesting premise with a high entertainment value? Now, if you like heist movies, honestly, you should just watch the first Den of Thieves. And this movie is okay as far as a heist movie goes, but the heist part is just like a secondary plot line to the character development side in that plot line. And so it's an okay heist movie. If you enjoy heist movies, you'll probably like this movie. But if you enjoy some character dives, then honestly, I don't know how good this movie is for you either, because the characters are not that interesting and not that fleshed out. But if you like action movies, that when the action is present in this movie, it's good. So you might enjoy this movie. Third is theme. What message or truth is the movie trying to convey? Now, the theme of this movie that's pretty present is mainly about loyalty and the justification of your actions. And I thought it was pretty good. I thought that was a good theme. I thought that was the driving force of the character development, was the reasoning behind why people do what they do and whether it's actually justified and whether you should be loyal to people for certain reasons or not, or things or ideas for certain reasons or not. I thought it was interesting. I thought when it was getting fleshed out, it was somewhat interesting, but it was just held back by other aspects of this movie being bad. Fourth is dialogue. Is there a real feel to the conversation? No, dude, this was the worst part of the movie. The dialogue is terrible. I don't know who is writing it, but especially for a movie that is going to be less about the heist and more about character development, it's really going to weigh on the conversations that are done. And the dialogue is so childlike in this movie. There's so much swearing that feels really unnatural. It doesn't come with any sort of anger. It's like these guys discovered that they could swear for the first time, and it's just like watching a child who discovered a swear word for the first time, and they just use it in every instance they can, and it just doesn't sound right. That is how it sounds in this movie. The conversations do not flow like real conversations. These characters don't sound like the people that they're representing. I mean, if you're a high stakes thief and like your life is on the line, like you could either die or be put in prison for what you're doing, I feel like these people are going to be much more serious than this movie indicates. And this movie isn't like a comedy where it's like, okay, I get it, that you're not supposed to be so serious. This movie is serious. It is supposed to be serious, and the conversations don't match, and it's a bad aspect of the movie that's really hard to miss. Fifth is acting. Are the characters convincing? Now, I'm going to point out two different actors, but Gerard Butler is the smoothest actor in this movie. And obviously, for obvious reasons, he's the most experienced. He's had the biggest roles in this movie, and he does a good job. He's held back somewhat by the dialogue, but I feel like his presence in the character is just better, and it helps with the dialogue. He was good enough that he could kind of offset the terrible dialogue, because you really felt like he was the character, and I just thought he did the smoothest job. Now, O'Shea Jackson Jr., he played Donnie, and again, I don't know if my problem was necessarily with him and more with the character, but I just did not think he fit the character. He doesn't look the part. I just didn't think that it just didn't really make much sense, especially, okay, I don't know, maybe this is justified, maybe it's not, but he's kind of a big guy, right? I mean, he's kind of fat, he's got some fat in there, and like, I don't care, but as far as his character, it just didn't really make sense, because I would say somebody who is, a huge thief, like a master thief that is robbing, the Federal Reserve and robbing this World Diamond Center, they're going to be extremely, I feel, rule-oriented. Like, they're going to have extreme discipline in their own life. And maybe it's just me looking too hard into it, but I just see this, like, fat guy whose dialogue is terrible and isn't portrayed to be that smart. I mean, he just doesn't do anything is that impressive, and he just doesn't fit. The whole time you're just like, this guy is the master thief. Like, are you serious? It just didn't really make sense, and I don't know if that was necessarily his fault, but I just feel like the character wasn't written that well. I think he fit the role well for the first movie, and I liked it. I liked the way his character was presented in the first movie, but this movie, it just didn't really work. 6 is cinematography. Is there a creative use of lighting, setting, and wardrobe to convey emotion? For the most part of this movie, it's really bland and there's not much to talk about. But when there is a heist going on, it's good. It was really good. I enjoyed it. Now, part of that is just heist movies in general are interesting, and when the heist is going on, it's interesting. So it was in this movie as well. I will say there was a very small section of this movie that had some actual intense, like, fighting going on, and that was amazing. There's a car chase sequence in this movie that I loved. I thought it was really good. The sound design for the gunshots was awesome. Whoever did that needs a raise. Like, it felt really good, but the problem was it was such a small part of this movie. If they would have done that for more of the movie, it would have been more interesting. As far as emotion goes, there's no emotion. I mean, I didn't feel any of it. Now, part of that is acting, part of that is dialogue. When the dialogue's that terrible, it's hard to really care that much about these characters because they don't really feel real. Like I said, with the writing of the plot, it was just boring, and I didn't really care about the characters that much. So when things go on that are supposed to make you somewhat emotional, it just didn't. But when the action sequences are on, they're good. 7th is editing. And this is all about the pace of the movie. The movie is 2 hours and 10 minutes long, and I would say it's on the longer end. Watching it the first time, it wasn't that bad, but I feel like if you had to watch this movie again, it would really drag on. Some of the character development is somewhat interesting. It's interesting enough to get you by, but if you knew that already going into the movie, it's too long. I definitely think they should have shortened it up a little bit, but it wasn't the end of the world. You kind of needed it for some of the development and the heist and action going on, because they kind of had a lot of storylines going into it that they didn't really need. They could have got rid of a couple of those storylines and this movie would have been just as good. So it probably would have been just as good of a movie, but at like an hour and 50 minutes. 8th is soundtrack. It is what it is. It's nothing great to talk about. It wasn't bad. It just kind of existed. 9th is directing. Now, I feel the director is in charge of the previous 8 aspects. They're the ones that have to put it all together, give it their stamp of approval, and make a good movie. Now, the director of this movie is Christian Gudgast. Hopefully, I said that right. And he has directed 2 total movies. The 2 movies that he's directed are Den of Thieves and Den of Thieves 2, Pantera. Now, obviously, I think Den of Thieves is better than Den of Thieves 2. I just think that he should probably stick to what made Den of Thieves successful. I feel like the storytelling in this movie wasn't nearly as good. I don't know how to feel about him as a director because there's some huge things in this I don't like, and one of those being dialogue. And if he was involved in the writing, I mean, he was there and shot the shots, and he heard how these lines were said and thought, yep, they're good. And I honestly just did not think they were at all. So he did a good job. What he did well in is the action, and I feel like that is something that was also appreciated in the first movie, and it's something that can be appreciated in this movie. It just isn't as present. I feel the storytelling wasn't as good. The acting was okay, but it was really affected by the dialogue. The dialogue really sucked. So if he can't get those things together, then he's just not going to be that good of a director. But he can get away with making movies because he does have a section that he is good at, which I would say is the action. 10th is time. Will it stand the test of time? No, I do not think it will stand the test of time. Honestly, it's going to be overshadowed by the original movie. Kind of like Gladiator 2, where it's like, it's a movie that you could watch, but honestly, just watch the first one. The first one is the same thing, but done better. That's exactly how this movie is going to go. It's going to be forgotten and overshadowed by the original movie, let alone a bunch of other heist and action movies that are better. Now for the review section. Now, Rotten Tomatoes critics gives it a 61. The audience gives it a 79, and IMDb gives it a 66. I think I am along the lines of the 66. I'd probably put it closer to that 70. But the things I like about this movie are just so far and few between. They're very small sections of this movie. So I can't really give it that much credit for the things that it did well, but it doesn't do things horrible other than like that dialogue that really bothers me. Those are things that really limit it in my eyes. So I feel like the 66 is fair. It's that kind of an upper D movie, but a lower C movie. Lastly, for the rankings. For the year of 2025, out of 2 total movies on the entertainment side, it's going to be first above The Damned. Honestly, not that hard of a decision. Den of Thieves 2 was easily more entertaining. I think it was made to be more entertaining than The Damned. And The Damned is just a horror movie, but it's a mediocre horror movie. Where Den of Thieves 2 at least has the heist section. It does have some sections that were entertaining. It honestly wasn't even really that hard of a decision to put it over The Damned. Now cinematically, out of the 2 total movies, I do have it second below The Damned. And these movies were surprisingly hard to put against each other. I think they're movies that they seem very different at surface level, but when you watch them, there's complaints on both sides. I just ended up feeling like The Damned did have a more serious tone, and some of the things on the smaller level were executed better. One of the things that I would put a lot of credit for is the dialogue. Den of Thieves 2 just had such bad dialogue that it really... That is such a knock for me on a movie, where The Damned, even though it may not have done anything that great and was getting boring throughout the movie, it didn't have that certain thing that was just going to piss me off because it was done so poorly. Rather, it was just done okay, and I feel like that represents film better than a movie like Den of Thieves 2. Now for the decade of the 2020s, out of 35 total movies on the entertainment side, it is going to be 20th, just below Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire, and above Gladiator 2. It's in that section where I would never choose to watch this movie again, but it is on the upper level of that. I wouldn't be miserable to have to watch this movie again. I feel like I have it below Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire because that movie is just a little less serious, and though it has a lot of problems, I enjoy the Ghostbusters universe, and I thought that it was entertaining in some sense, where Den of Thieves 2 was just a little more serious for my liking. I just think that Ghostbusters is kind of saved by the other Ghostbusters movie because I enjoy the world. Now I do have it above Gladiator 2, and honestly, you could flip-flop these and I would not care. I think I enjoyed the heist aspect of the movie a little bit better, the criminals. I just think that was a little more interesting than Gladiator 2. But honestly, if you flip them, I would not be mad. I just had to put it somewhere. Now, cinematically, out of 35 total movies, it is going to be 26, just below The Damned and above Venom: The Last Dance. Again, it's just surprisingly similar to The Damned, so unfortunately it's right next to it, and it's there for the same reason as in 2025. But I did have it above Venom: The Last Dance, and both of these had terrible dialogue that I hated, but I really, for Den of Thieves 2, I really honed in on the fact that there was at least the heist section and the car chase scene that I really enjoyed. Those scenes are something I would show somebody because I thought they were just done that well. Venom: The Last Dance does not have anything like that. I think they're fairly similar in their quality as far as cinematography goes and just not really having any emotion. But I do think that there was a section I enjoyed out of Den of Thieves 2 where I don't have any that I really enjoyed in Venom: The Last Dance. Now, all time out of 47 total movies on the entertainment side, it is going to be 31st, again, below Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire and above Gladiator 2. It's there for the exact same reasons as before. Now, out of 47 movies on the cinematic side, it's going to be 37th, just below The Damned and above Venom: The Last Dance. Again, it's there for the exact same reasons as before. That's all I've got for Den of Thieves 2 Pantera. If you've seen it, did you enjoy it more than I did? I thought this movie was fairly disappointing, but I did like the action. I did like the heist. I just wish they would have done more with that rather than the characters. Let me know your thoughts on the dialogue. I really hated it, thought it felt unnatural, but I'm curious to see what you guys think. I really enjoy when you guys comment, so thank you for the people that comment. That's the whole reason I made this channel, was to interact with you guys and talk to people who also enjoy movies. So I love hearing your opinion, so make sure you comment down your opinion on this movie. If you want to check somebody else out who does a similar thing to me, then check out my best friend Bosso Movie Reviews. He does the same thing where he ranks some movies on movies released in the same year, decade, and all time, but he has a very different opinion than me. He has a bigger list. He does much more different movies. I try to keep up with the current movies a lot more than because I just don't have as much time, and he does a lot of past movies, so go check him out if you're interested. Make sure to comment a movie that you want me to review, and I will eventually get to it, and ensure that you subscribe so that you can see me review that movie. But otherwise, I'm Mr. Majoritarian. Stay classy, San Diego.